Good afternoon. In your programs, I'm pretty sure it says something really boring, like triangulating skills or something. All Things Agile is just the working title that the lovely Steve Waite gave me when he asked me to do this talk. And I've just decided I like it. Those three words sum up for me the breadth of our interest and the height of our ambition at the Agile Business Consortium. Because we were there at the start of Agile. Back in the 1990s, we were there. And our mission now is to take everything we've learned in those 20 years and all the relationships that we've built and to help organizations to apply Agile principles throughout the enterprise. So all things Agile feels about right to me. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the history of our organization. And then I'm going to tell you about the framework for business agility that we've created, show you how it maps onto the talent triangle. We'll do a little walk around the triangle, stopping off at each leg if triangles have legs. Looking at some of the things that are coming out in the next few months. We'll talk about Agile portfolios, we'll talk about Agile Dojo, Agile Digital Services, and then at the end I'm going to give you a little invitation to join us on our journey. So we started off, as I said, in 1995. DSDM was one of the first three original Agile frameworks, along with Scrum and XP. DSDM stands for Dynamic Systems Development Method, but you really don't need to know that. We were called the DSDM Consortium, and in 2001 we were a signatory to the Agile Manifesto. We were then, and have always been, and still are, a not-for-profit organisation, a membership organisation, an organisation whose strength comes from the connections we make, the links we make, the members who come and work with us. 2010, we finally realised that DSDM was a ridiculous name, and we worked with APMG to come up with Agile PM. Agile Project Management, the largest Agile Project Management course, around 75,000 people certified. And then last year, we finally realized that DSDM Consortium is also a ridiculous name for a consortium, because unless you're a geek and you know what DSDM is, then DSDM Consortium means nothing. So we've rebranded ourselves the Agile Business Consortium, because we are what we say on the tin. And there's us in pictures, so you can see the lovely, pretty DSDM manual back in 1995, very modern looking. 2010 Agile PM, one whole iteration in 15 years, that's pretty agile. We have got faster since then. And here's the framework for business agility. This is where we are now. And I'll just take you through that by showing you how it aligns to the talent triangle. So we can start by looking at technical project management. So this stuff here in the middle, service evolution, product management, projects and programs. That was our bread and butter for years and years. It's still really important, but as many speakers today have been articulating, it's not enough anymore. So as we go around the triangle and we look at strategic and business management, we've got portfolios. We talked a little bit this morning about the importance of portfolio management. Agile governance, business operations, enablement and strategy. And then the final leg, leadership. The importance of culture and leadership. And what might agile culture and agile leadership be, and how's that different from just good culture and good leadership? So I said I'd walk us around. Let's go through the purple window, and let's talk about agile portfolios. So we're launching a new book. It's being launched in Australia this month. It'll be launched formally in the UK next month, called Agile Portfolio Management. It's a whole book. I've got 25 minutes. I've not got time to talk to you about it now, but I will talk to you about one image. When we talk to senior executives, what we're saying when we talk about portfolios is we don't want to see a portfolio that looks like a document or looks like an Excel spreadsheet or looks like a Gantt chart. We want to see portfolios that are hourglass shaped. So what do I mean by that? If you think about the neck of an hourglass, those of you who are familiar with Kanban will know about limiting work in progress. Limiting work in progress is all about getting the best flow that you can through the system, reducing the lead times. The more you can constrain that work in progress while maintaining flow, the quicker you can be, the more agile you can be, the more responsive you can be. Most organizations have lots of projects drip feeding through their big fat necks. So think about the neck of the portfolio as the stuff that's going through. Make sure that's as clean as possible, flowing as beautifully as possible, and allow your teams to manage that. Your portfolio management, your portfolio governance should not be interested in monitoring work in progress. Where they should be at working is up higher up. So just above the neck, we want lots of little fine-grained sand granules where we know exactly how we're going to spin up this initiative. We know how we're going to resource it, we know what to do with it, we know we've got the right people in place, so when that comes to the neck, it will flow through. And then above is the really interesting stuff. We've got little pebbles. We kind of understand them, we kind of know the business case, but we need to do some work with them now. Let's not wait till they get to the neck where they won't fit. Let's start thinking about them now. And then right at the top, we've got great big clods of potential value. Stuff where we've got a great idea, we think there's something there, and we need to poke at it. So our portfolio management, portfolio governance should be up at that level, poking away at this stuff, balancing the portfolio, understanding how needs in the organization are changing, and making sure that stuff slides down beautifully. So there's something to take away. Think hourglass-shaped portfolios. Okay, let's move around the triangle. Let's talk about leadership. So agile culture and leadership. Agile dojo. So a dojo, for those not in the know, is the training hall where martial arts people go to practice. And given the history of Agile and its roots in Japan, it seemed like a kind of nice fit for us. So we're creating a prototype Agile Dojo website which will be available for people to play with in December, free for everyone to use, and that will contain little snippets of video, white papers, tips and tricks, thinking not just from the consortium, but from all of our partners, pulling in around agile culture and agile leadership. What can you use, what tools and techniques can you use to really make that happen? We'll be certifying training through the Agile Dojo and using that as a community of interest for people involved in that area of work. So that's just a quick snippet. Again, that will be available to look at in December. And then let's get on to technical project management, because we're still interested in the nuts and bolts, and talk a little bit about Agile Digital Services. So I was in Rome last weekend talking to another big collection of Italian project managers, and I don't speak Italian, so it was a little bit tricky. But while I was there, I became aware that I was doing something really interesting, apart from the fact that I was a temporary exile from Brexit Britain, which was rather nice. I was talking about that rarest of things, a modern UK government success story. Because there it is. If you look at last year's UN table on e-government, the UK is at the top. And if you look at that little graph next to it, where for some peculiar reason down is good and up is bad, you'll see that 10 years ago we were languishing way behind everybody else. So in 10 years the UK has gone from being a very poor performer in e-government to being the world's #1. And I think the story of how that happened is worth retelling because it's not told enough. It's a story that starts in 2010. We were 2 years after the financial crisis. Everyone desperate to save money and do things more cheaply. New Cameron government has come into power. And at that point, there's a morass of government websites, hundreds and hundreds of separate websites. You have to know which ministry deals with the thing that you want. You have to know what they call it. People will remember what it was like trying to file your tax returns in the early days of self-assessment online. It wasn't fun. And Cameron gave the job to someone called Martha Lane Fox, who you may remember was the person that started up lastminute.com and became the UK's digital champion. So in 2009, she was the person who was responsible for trying to get Britain online, skilling up the workforce and those people who are disenfranchised. And she was given the job of looking at all of these UK e-government websites and working out what on earth we were supposed to do. And she came up with a letter to Francis Maude at the Cabinet Office in November 2010 that called for revolution and not evolution. It was a manifesto for how to bring a service culture to British e-government. Manifesto was very short, had 4 points. We need to open APIs so that the government shares its data with anyone that wants to consume it to do whatever it wants to improve citizens' lives. We want a single website, so for gov.uk, what was then DirectGov, to become the single place that citizens can go to get everything they need from government. We're going to create, this is not going to sound very agile, we're going to create a single team with absolute authority to define the user experience. User experience had never been talked about in government before. And we're going to have a chief executive for digital within government. So Francis Maude gets this letter in 2010, in November. He agrees to it in December. The hiring starts in January 2011, and by March 2011 in Hercules House in London, there is a team of bright young things who are given the task of creating the prototype, the alpha we would now call it, for gov.uk in 10 weeks, just 10 weeks. And in 10 weeks and 1 day, they deliver the alpha of gov.uk. Now that's astonishing in all kinds of ways, because that's just not the way that government works. That time scale, 6 months from conception to delivery, was extraordinary at the time. But it's not the most extraordinary part of the story. This is a picture that was drawn on the wall on a flip chart by a guy called Richard Pope, who was a product manager for the very early Government Digital Services, GDS, which is what this outfit was called and is still called. And it's the kind of stuff you see in kind of any agile type organization these days. Interestingly, the gov.uk website has gone through all kinds of iterations since then. It so happens now it looks pretty similar to that original Richard Pope diagram. But what was interesting about what was happening at the time was that that team didn't look like government. What that team looked like is a tech startup. Here we have one building, a bunch of committed people, a cross-functional team, co-located, very clear vision, clear resourcing, a very clear sponsor, delivering incrementally and putting the users at the center of everything. As I say, it sounds like an agile tech startup. And that's interesting just because for government to trust a group of people to just deliver something like that and then get on with it was unusual. But to me, what's really unusual is what happens next. And that's why, before I talk about our course, I'm just going to complete this little story of GDS, because I think it's a great story at the centre of the British government. And as I said, there aren't very many. So what's really unusual is that 7 years later, that little agile team, that agile baby, has not been gobbled up by the giant bureaucratic dinosaur of government. And the question is, how did that agility, how did those agile ideas survive the transition from tiny little startup team in Hercules House to cross-government? And I think the answer to that question lies in everything we've been talking about today, which is that when GDS started to scale this stuff out, they didn't talk to people about processes or tools or methods or frameworks. They talked about people, they talked about leadership, they talked about culture. I'll give you a couple of examples. So right from the start, GDS had these design principles. And they're so good that they're worth going through, because if you can't make use of these in your businesses, you're not paying attention. So start with user needs. Understand who your users are and who they're not, and what do they really need. Citizen over government. Put user needs first, government needs second. That's new. Do less. Those of you who know the Agile Manifesto will know that on the back of the Agile Manifesto there are 12 principles. And I have a favorite. It's principle number 10. I don't know them all off by heart. But principle number 10 is the one about the art of maximizing the work not done. Just for anyone who's not heard that before, let me repeat it so it can just sink in. The art of maximizing the work not done. From my point of view, the biggest single benefit that you get immediately from agile approaches is in that sentence. It's the projects you don't start. It's the projects you kill off early because they're not delivering value. It's the features you choose not to deliver yet, because at this point in time they're not the most important thing. Do less. Use reusable stuff. Use open source code. Whatever you can do to do less. Design with data. Data is not a reporting thing that you do at the end. It's the heart and the lifeblood of everything that tells you that what you're doing is working. So build it in, have it always on, and make sure that it's easy to read. Do the hard work to make it simple. It's easy to make a website look simple. It's hard to make it easy to use. So make sure that that user experience design is built into what you do. Iterate, then iterate again. And actually, in the GDS manual, it says, start simply, iterate wildly. I think that's fantastic in a government mandate. Iterate wildly. This is for everyone. You have to make what you do inclusive. You have to make it accessible. It doesn't have to be pretty. It's important to remember that the things that we're building are most difficult to access for the people who need them most. Understand context. We're not building for screens, we're building for people. We need to understand where they are, what they're doing when they're accessing our services. Build digital services, not websites. Most of the digital services we're building connect to something in the real world. So we have to start from beginning to end. Don't just treat it as a digital service. If you want to know how that works, ask Amazon. Be consistent, not uniform. Use the same language when you can. Use the same design patterns when you can. And really importantly, and again, this is not what government traditionally did, make things open. Share your code, share your data, share your successes, share your failures. And that way we make things better. GDS did all of these things. All of this looks agile. None of it is about processes and tools. None of this is how. This is all about the underlying principles and the values we're going to use. And they didn't stop there. They said, okay, this is government. Let's shake up governance too. So these are the governance principles that GDS put together. Don't slow down delivery. It's the neck of the portfolio hourglass. So do stand-ups. Your job as a manager, as a servant leader, is to understand what your team needs and get it to them as fast as possible, understand what's in their way, and get those obstacles out of the way as quick as possible. Decisions when they're needed. So at the right level, make sure your service manager and your teams are empowered to make decisions. Freedom to act within boundaries. We heard that just before. Make sure that within those boundaries, they are free to act and don't have to escalate. Do it with the right people. Give your team the skills, the environment, the tools that they need to be able to collaborate and to deliver. Go see for yourself. This is so new in government. Do not sit in a meeting room expecting your team to come with a PowerPoint presentation and a bunch of spreadsheets to tell you how they're getting on. Go see. Go to the sprint reviews, go to the showcases, look at the product that's being built. Understand what's really happening in your teams. Only do it if you add value. Make sure that your teams, and we're back to the Roman army again, make sure that your teams know what the vision is, how success is going to be measured, and then allow them to experiment. Allow them to try new ideas, and if they work, build on them, and if they don't, stop them. Don't get in their way. And finally, trust and verify. We had this from Warren Buffett right at the start of the day. Hire trustworthy people, and then trust them a lot. So you trust your teams and you verify by being involved little and often, by walking around, by being part of meetings and understanding what's going on. This is just radical for government, and this has been going on in GDS, not without flaws, I would hasten to add, but this has been going on across GDS, across digital service creation in government for the last 7 years. So everything looks great. So Agile and digital, everything fits together perfectly. And yet, we found, when we got involved, that there was a problem. Because government does need tools and processes, so our Agile project management course is something that government started sending lots and lots of people on, and we started getting issues coming back that this wasn't really working for people. And there's a couple of pictures here that will help you to see why. This is the Agile PM process. This is the kind of that diagram that illustrates the way that we work, the way that we spin up an iterative project. This is what the GDS lifecycle looks like. So you can imagine yourself going on a course and being told the thing on the left is the thing you need to learn for your exam. But when you go home on Friday, you can put that in the bin because when you come back in on Monday, the thing on the right is the thing that you're going to have to be working towards. And it's not just the life cycle, it's the roles, it's the products, and the fact that user research is not something we'd ever provided a chapter on, so we never covered it. So there was a mismatch at the heart of what we were trying to do, a terminology gap, a difference. And what we want is successful people coming through exams, but people who are happy and able to engage in their jobs when they go back to work on Monday. So we did our own user research, and it became fairly clear, fairly early, that what we needed to do was to take all of that great stuff from GDS, those fantastic design principles, the governance principles, proper kind of roles for government, and then take all of our Agile PM governance and the project wrappers and smoosh them together to create something coherent and consistent that would teach people how to do Agile project management the GDS way. And that's what we've spent the last 6 months doing, and that's what Agile Digital Services is designed to do. So I'm just going to give you the swiftest of walks through Agile Digital Services. So it starts off by saying we still care about projects, and you know what? Programs and portfolios are important. There's a structure that's needed around Agile to make it work, especially in complex organizations like government. That's a slightly more colourful version of the GDS lifecycle. And it's great. Discovery is where you do your user research. Alpha is where you build your prototypes. Private beta, you get real users in and you test out stuff. Public beta, you release it to the world with a little blue badge on, and then eventually you get to live. And that's great, but everybody in this room who's a project manager knows you can't start there, because how do you spin up the project? How do you decide what you're going to do? How do you build your discovery team? So we need to start wrapping it. So we put a project wrapper around it. So let's have a pre-project at the beginning where we do that initial business case exploration and so on. Let's put some gates in. Let's work out how we're going to ensure that we're making proper decisions, that it's ready to move into alpha from discovery, that the work we've learned in alpha doesn't undermine the business case, and it's okay to move into beta. And this is fine if what you're building is a simple service like tax your car, but what if you're doing what some of my colleagues are doing in the Ministry of Justice at the moment, where you're building a really complex version of e-government that's doing prosecute a case, defend a case, adjudicate a case, manage a case. We need to be able to start to scale. So how do we build a project that encompasses multiple service teams? How do we get a single view of discovery, a single view of project? How can we gate this thing in a way that makes sense? So we've been building up on the GDS stuff, but giving it some proper project governance. I won't go into the roles diagram because they're too little to see, but we've built a new roles model that still has the idea of a project level at the top, directing at the project, solution development teams who are autonomous, self-directed within boundaries, within a sprint. But we've built in the GDS roles, user experience and user designers and so on. But again, how do you scale it? So let's make sure we've got a model that allows you to take that project and recognize that some teams in government are 100 people strong. And you're not going to have a single scrum team of 100 people because it's not going to work and the two pizzas aren't going to go round. Let's have a lightweight set of documents and products, work products that we can use to provide governance. Make sure that we've got as few as we can get away with, and make sure they're flexible enough that people can use the ones they need. And let's do a little bit of work around solution work products, so prototypes and wireframes and all that kind of stuff. So we cover all of that, and we cover user research. So we actually work with teams on how to do proper user research. What does it mean? Why is it different from specifications the way we used to do them in the old days? Go and ask Fred, who works in the customer service team. And finally, a little bit about incremental delivery. So the idea of going back to where MVPs, minimum viable products, came from lean startup, and re-educating people that an MVP is a learning device. A minimum viable product should be your first easy, quick, end-to-end process. It's not ready for users yet, it's something to learn. Does this process make sense end-to-end? And then we build on it, and then when we're ready, we move to a minimum marketable product, and that's when we start putting out into real users' hands. But it's still the first cut, and we're going to continue to improve and continue to iterate. And what we're looking for in the end is lovable services. That came up from one of our user research forums, and we loved it. Lovable services. So this is what we've been doing. We did 2 alpha courses in Newcastle City Council and the Ministry of Justice back in April this year. We're currently just finished our round of private betas, so we've been going to 12 public sector organisations, central government, local government, NHS, running our course, getting feedback, feeding that back in. We're going to do another iteration over the course of the next couple of weeks. In January, we will launch this course, much to APMG's concern, with a great big blue beta badge on the front cover of the book, because we are saying to people, even though we're launching it, it's not finished. And we'll spend another 3 months at least getting feedback from the first people who go through the public courses, iterating again, and reissuing probably somewhere around April. So this will be available for people to use next year. Of course, it's focused on government because we've used GDS at the core, but that GDS stuff is brilliant. And certainly if you're in local government or the NHS or the third sector, this stuff is going to be relevant. But if you're in any sector that has got users at the centre, is providing digital services, so in financial services and insurance and retail, I would argue that that GDS stuff is so good and has been so well tested that you should be looking at using it too. So that's Agile Digital Services. I said I would finish with an invitation. So here's the invitation. This is a kind of another look at that framework for business agility, or the PMI triangle. So you can see project management, strategy and operations in the middle, culture and leadership. And in the middle, shared values. And that's what we're interested in. We're interested in looking for people who share our values. Don't have to agree with us on everything or even anything else. But if you share our values, we want to be part of a conversation. Because together we want to build out content. And together we want to build out from that products and services that are useful to real people. We want to work out how we accredit that in a way that makes it useful for punters and not just easy for us to deliver. And then we want to help training organizations, consulting organizations, and coaches to work with the content that we're building and to create feedback loops to make sure we can continue to improve it. And finally, on the outside, most importantly, there are real users, and we want real users as part of our community too. Because as I said before, we are a not-for-profit, we're a community, we don't sell services ourselves, we work with partners. So if you think that you might share our values, come and talk to us on the stand, find out how you can be involved in conversations about building out this idea of business agility. Taking your experience of whatever you've done, especially if you're involved in Agile, and helping us to evolve that content. Because only by doing all of that and doing it collaboratively will we make all things Agile. Thank you so much.